As someone originally from Japan and married to a Korean wife, I'm going to be explaining the difference between Japan and Korea. Japan versus Korea. In the past 6 years of knowing my wife, I learned so much about the differences and similarities of Japan and Korea. They seem very similar, but yet very different. After visiting Korea a couple times and spending some time with my wife's parents and her friends, as well as watching K-dramas and walking around the actual city, through the experience I learned that Korean people are more upfront when it comes to communication compared to Japanese people. Partially growing up in Japan and also living under the same roof with my Japanese parents, I say I know a lot about Japanese culture. Japanese people tend to hold back on their thoughts and not necessarily express their feelings. They're kind of on the extreme spectrum of things. In Japan, there's even a commonly used expression called tomawashi, which means to communicate in an indirect and roundabout way to avoid conflicts or criticize someone. For example, in this illustration, a dude is talking to someone saying, "Hey mister, you look like you only hang your futon out in the sun once a year," which basically means you look unhygienic and dirty. Number 2 is food culture. When I first visited Korea, I was very surprised with how people really enjoyed food there. It was a different energy compared to when I was in Japan. Of course, Japanese people love their food too, but there's some kind of this positive energy towards food. They love their food and they like to enjoy and share their food with others. In Japan, yes, you will have the experience, but it's the different vibe and energy behind it. That makes the experience in Korea, for me, something new. It's very exciting there. I enjoy the time there, having food and sharing food with others. Speaking of Korea, do you guys like things from Korea? If you do, then you have to go check out From Seoul Studio. It's an online store started by my wife that sells tumblers, bowls, and other miscellaneous goods that you can't find in the United States. They are high quality and we use them every single day. Click the link down below and check out the beautifully designed items by my wife to support what we do. Now let's get back to the video. Number 3 is respect towards their parents and family. In Japan, there's very much of this hierarchy between elderly and the parents and their kids. You know how you should interact generally towards them in the family scenarios, or as well as when you join a company, you always have to show more respect. I would say, in a different style. When I visited Korea for the first time, I noticed how, let's say for my wife, how she interacted with her parents was, I would say, more traditional and strict compared to how nowadays young Japanese people are. Now, a lot of people might argue with me because Japan's got this impression of everyone being super respectful, but there's definitely more respect in Japan between the relationship of the customer to the employee scenarios, like when you're in the business settings. But I'm just specifically talking about in the family scenarios, where you're speaking to your parents, you always want to speak to them politely, and that's not necessarily the case in Japan, I would say. I don't know too many families who speaks to their parents using keigo, which is a polite form of speaking Japanese. My wife told me that that's the form that a lot of kids speak to their parents, and that was something new to me. Number 4 is Korea being a little bit more physical when it comes to forms of communications. In Japan, you don't touch your friends that much or your partner that much. In Korea, I noticed that when you're in the friendly scenarios, you will kind of lightly tap on their shoulders and lightly hit them, and that happens between friends or between couples, and that's kind of another form of communication and just being friendly and stuff that you have less in Japan. So when I first started dating my wife, I was very surprised that she would hit me on my shoulder, and I was like, "Oh, why are you hitting me?" That was something that I was not used to, so that's another difference. Number 5 is rushing to get stuff done. I say in Korea, people rush to get stuff done. They want things done quickly, whereas in Japan, they value more of like accuracy and making sure you do everything right. I specifically remember this scenario that happened in Japan personally when I visited the city hall with my wife, and then we had to fill out this form and we made a mistake. So when we submitted it, the guy who was working there asked us to correct it, and my wife was correcting it because it was her paperwork, and she was trying to rush through stuff, and she made like a couple mistakes again, like because she was in such a hurry. She was doing it in front of the guy who was working there. We were like, calm down, Minju, you don't have to rush through this stuff. Me and the Japanese employee there had the same reaction, so it was kind of funny because like in Japan, like we do things more like at a slower pace, but making sure we do things right. Number 6 is a wet bathroom floor. I might have mentioned this in another video, but when I first started living with my wife for the first time, I was very surprised at like how the Korean bathrooms work. When you go into the bathroom, it's like one same floor you share, and there's like a shower head, and then like the water can run to the toilet. And you know, the entire floor could get wet if somebody takes a shower. So because of that, like Korean people are used to, you know, kind of like splashing water when they're like using the bathroom, like when they're washing their face and stuff, you know, because they're so used to getting all the floor wet anyways, and it just drains all together anyways. So when my wife moved to like Japan with me, or when we are living in the United States, you know, she's like so used to getting the floor wet, and then I'm like, what's going on? Because my socks get wet, flooring kind of gets messed up a little bit sometimes if there's too much water. So, you know, I was so confused, but that was kind of an interesting difference for me to find out. Number 7 is kimchi fried rice. So growing up in Japan and then, you know, knowing their recipes, you know, I always enjoy making kimchi fried rice, which is you just include like pork and kimchi and rice and some eggs. And then I used to love that as a Japanese person, and a lot of Japanese people make it at home. And I was very surprised when Minju made it, when my wife made it, the Korean style, and allocations of each ingredient is much different. I noticed like the Japanese style, or a lot of Japanese people just include like a little bit of kimchi to add as like one of the ingredients that they include in the kimchi fried rice. The kimchi doesn't have a whole lot of presence in the kimchi fried rice. It's just like one of the ingredients in there. But the style that my wife, or that when I visit Korea, the people make are like cooked kimchi and then some fried rice on top of it. There's a lot more kimchi in their kimchi fried rice, and that was very surprising for me, and I found it very funny. Anyways, those are the 7 things I found that was different between Japan and Korea. And I hope you found this video interesting, funny, as I did, as I experienced it. If you liked the video, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Thanks for watching. Take care.